I'm Elizabeth English, your Forum Curricular Coordinator for this year. We are very excited that Ellen Lupton is with us today. Ellen is our first guest speaker of the year. It's very exciting. Thank you for being here. I think it's on. It's right here. Ellen, in addition to being our first guest speaker, is the Curator Emerita at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum in New York City, and also serves as the Betty Cooke and William O. Steimetz Design Chair at MICA's Graphic Design MFA program. Ellen has had an astonishing career in graphic design, and in a moment will be introduced further by the current chair of our undergraduate graphic design program, Christian Bjornard. Ellen's talk is going to cover design responses to the COVID-19 pandemic and will demonstrate that artists, designers, and professionals of all kinds work together and with the community to address issues from a visual perspective. For our students, for you all, as you listen, I want you to keep one question in mind. What does this have to do with me? Okay. Has a lot to do with you. If you were called on to help solve a problem, how might you use your identity as a visual thinker to help? How might you collaborate with others to come up with a solution? As you listen, take a moment to consider how your body interacts in space. How might your experience of that be different from someone else's? Where do we go from there? I'll let Ellen light the way, but first I'd like to introduce Christian Bjornard, Chair of the Undergraduate Design Program at MICA. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, everybody.
That's right.
My name is Christian Bjornard, and I am the current interim chair of the Undergraduate Graphic Design Department. I'm here today to introduce your lovely speaker, Ellen Lupton. I have the pleasure of having known her for 15 years now. I came to MICA as a graphic design master's of fine arts student in 2007. And I showed up, and the first day we got to pick some projects to work on for a new book that Ellen was working on, because I think, as you might find out through my introduction and through perhaps what you see today, Ellen produces a lot of books. But I worked on a project called Sexy Librarian with Ellen, and it was a great introduction. It was weird and interesting and funny, and I think we had a pretty good time working on that. Well, Ellen was also once the undergrad chair of graphic design here, and between her work as the undergraduate chair and her role now as the director of the MFA program, she's just sort of worked tirelessly to make design the, fantastic place that it is in our school. I mean, all of the school is fantastic, but our design department is sort of like really blossomed under her energy here. Anyway, so she's a tireless advocate for design and making sure that preferably all people have access and knowledge and skills of good design. And anyway, so you'll see in her exhibition, in her presentation today, that through her books and her exhibitions that she really sort of brings humor, which often is lacking in design presentations, and a passion that everyone should be able to access and benefit from quality design. So, without further ado, pardon my little riff, please welcome Ellen Lupton.
Thank you. Hello, good. I like this one better because I want you to be able to see me because it's design. Hi, I'm so glad to be here. What a beautiful crowd. If there's one thing I want to convey today, it's just how much I love design. It is my life. I love teaching design at MICA. I love doing exhibitions and books and so forth in the public. And so I just want to convey that passion to you. And I know there are some design-oriented people in the room. Anybody identify as a designer? Be proud. Be proud. Show it. Thank you. Good. Maybe there'll be even more after today's talk. Who knows? If not, email me. I will try to convert you to becoming a graphic designer or a fashion designer or product designer or architect. There's just so much in this field. So I'm going to talk about 2 projects that I've been working on over the last couple of years that both have to do with design and healthcare. One of the things that I've discovered over my life is that there's just always more stuff that design makes better, like food and traffic signs and shoes. And I challenge you to come up with anything that design isn't part of. So I'm going to talk to you about an exhibition that's currently on view at Cooper Hewitt Museum, and also about a book that I finished also with Cooper Hewitt about design and healthcare. Yep, these are some of my books. I do have a warning. There is some negative content in this presentation about sickness, mortality, and racial injustice. So the exhibition is called Design and Healing, Creative Responses to Epidemics. And you can see it in New York City, this beautiful installation created with my collaborators, Mass Design Group, who helped assemble this amazing collection of architectural things, product design, fashion design, about how designers have responded to epidemics historically, but most importantly, in the current COVID-19 epidemic. It's pretty heavy. We have a trigger warning there, too. You know, it's like you got to prepare people to come in and look at this kind of stuff. So at the end of the exhibition is this beautiful room designed by Sahil and Sartak, who are designers in New Delhi in India. And I commissioned them to create this beautiful environment for healing in the glass conservatory of Cooper Hewitt, which is itself a space of healing. So many mansions for rich people in the 19th century had these glass greenhouses, and they were intended to be a place where people could absorb sunlight and feel better mentally and physically. And so design has, for forever, instinctively, architects and designers have known that creating a beautiful environment for people with access to nature makes them feel good and be healthier. So we made this beautiful healing space with Sahil and Sartak. So come to Cooper Hewitt just to hang out in this gorgeous room with these fuzzy cushions that are so beautiful. And the other project I'm going to tell you about is this book called Health Design Thinking, which is a manual for design intended for designers and artists, but also for doctors and nurses and pharmacists and people in the healthcare industry. And I co-authored that with this wonderful guy, Dr. Bon Koo, who's an emergency room physician in Philadelphia. And he and I just happened to meet, and he runs a health design lab at the Thomas Jefferson Medical School and has been applying design thinking to healthcare problems, and he teaches design to medical students, which is so cool. And he's invited me a bunch of times to go to the medical school and actually do design lessons with young people like you, but who are becoming doctors. So that's been really fun. And here's like people working in his super cool lab. And Bon had developed a whole set of principles about design and medicine, and he really wanted to do a book on that subject. And I'm like, hey, that's easy. That's easy for me. So let's do a book together. So the book is for everyone to think about how to apply design to healthcare problems. And I'm going to show you a few of the ideas in the book, a few stories from the book. that was really fun to work on. So one of the principles of designing for healthcare is called human-centered design. And you might think that all design is human-centered, right? Design is functional. People use it. So why would the idea of human-centered design be different from just any product? The chairs that you're sitting in, the room that we're in, are they human-centered? Well, design has all kinds of centers. So here are two objects from the Cooper Hewitt collection. One is a design for a doorknob inspired by music. That is a profound, cool, aesthetic, philosophical idea, right? An artistic idea about how a doorknob could be designed, right? So no job too small for us. Doorknobs are awesome, okay? That's not human-centered, though. That's art-centered. That's about the philosophy and point of view of the designer. This doorknob is a plastic thing that you can stick over a round doorknob, which enables somebody who doesn't have use of two hands to open the door. So it converts an old school round doorknob into a lever style doorknob, which I could open with my elbow, right? So it makes it into a accessible design. And so that would be an example of human-centered design. It's not solving an aesthetic problem. It's solving a human functional need that was overlooked in the previous designs. I love that it's red, and you might go, well, that's artistic, right? Well, actually, making it red makes it more visible to people who are visually impaired, more visible to a person who might have dementia. And so even the use of color in this doorknob is a human-centered decision. And so I love that. And I love all kinds of design. I also love super artistic, aesthetic, philosophical design. I have room in my heart for pretty much everything, except for round doorknobs, which drive me crazy. I don't like them. Okay, so here's a story from our book, the book that Dr. Cooke and I did. And this is about a product that was developed by a team of his medical students at Jefferson University. And the problem that they were trying to solve was giving gynecological exams in the emergency room. Okay, and some of you may have experienced this. Millions of such exams are given every year. And the problem with these exams is that emergency departments don't have the proper furniture for a pelvic exam. And so what happens is that the patient's pelvis gets elevated on a bedpan. I told you we were going to talk about some nasty stuff, right? You with me? Bedpan, okay? Not a very dignified experience for the patient. Not a great experience for the caregivers either, right? A big negative. And so the design challenge was how to create a way to do a safe, comfortable, dignified exam. And the designers came up with a collapsible wedge, essentially, that stores flat because there's no storage space in emergency departments, and then pops up to become an appropriate device for this exam. Human-centered in the design process. Every member of the team had to get examined on the table, no matter what their gender was. And this was about creating an experience where the designers were all on the same plane. And that sense of empathy and trying to experience a problem from the point of view of users is a big part of universal design and human-centered design. And that's the product, and they're actually developing it. Here's another problem. Can signage reduce violence and aggression in the emergency department? So emergency departments are actually pretty violent places. Why? Because people get angry there, and they attack each other, and they attack the caregivers, and they attack themselves, right? People get very frustrated. And a major reason for violence in the emergency department is that people are upset about waiting. Isn't that awful, right? So here's this experience of being in the hospital, and the long wait is causing people so much anxiety and so much upset that they become violent. And so in this project, the design team realized that if people had a better understanding of why they were waiting, where they were in the process of being seen, that they would have less anxiety. And this would help not just the people that might get violent, right, who are probably more disturbed and more prone to violence, right, but it might help just a mom and her kid. Because everybody gets anxious when they have to wait. And so here's graphic design to the rescue, this set of really very simple vinyl printed banners that can be hung throughout the emergency department, not just in one hospital, but in hospitals everywhere, that give people a sense of where they are in the process of being seen. And one of the things that I learned in collaborating with doctors is that when you're waiting in the emergency room, it's actually part of the treatment. That you've entered this healthcare space, and they can't just send you home. They have to actually have you wait for a while. It's called observation. And people often feel like they've been forgotten and overlooked and nothing's happening. But actually, some of that duration is part of the care itself. So I think that's pretty cool use of graphic design to help people feel better in a really stressful situation. This is a project that was done by a student, Molly Bonnell, who was born with a disease called cystic fibrosis, which means that she spends a lot of time in hospitals getting care. And she wanted to address the inhumanity of hospital clothing, which she felt really took away her sense of identity when she went to the hospital. And so she developed a line of clothing for people that do spend a lot of time in care that would allow them to feel warm and comfortable and individual, while also having places for the kind of healthcare procedures that they were there for. And that meant she had to collaborate with the nurses to find out what kind of materials would be effective, how does something like a beautiful sweater like this withstand the kind of laundry that's required in a hospital. And so she brought her perspective as a patient to bear on this really overlooked area of what people wear in hospitals. There's another graphic design project, also by a patient who is suffering from chronic illness. And she's also a graphic designer named Catherine McCurdy, incredible designer. And she felt that by going to different specialists over and over again for her chronic conditions, she was always explaining the story of her illness. And she realized that if she made a piece of graphic design that told the timeline of her illness and charted, what was going on with her at different times in her life and when different symptoms were peaking or when they were dropping, that she could communicate better to her doctors. And the doctors loved it. They were like, they could really connect to her much better. And she ended up creating her own business, helping other patients with chronic illnesses express their health history and their symptoms through graphic design. I think that's pretty cool. Here's a story. This is Dr. Alistair Martin, who's another emergency physician. And during the 2020 election, he really wanted to find a way to encourage people to register to vote. And a hospital, if you think about it, is really a community. Yes, he did a good job. Right, and vote now, right? Vote in November, very important. Hospitals are community centers, right? People, and especially emergency rooms, people come in for care. Thousands of people are employed in hospitals. And he was like, wow, this would be a great place to connect people with information about how to register to vote. And so he designed this little kiosk with an iPad and some signage so that people could put in their zip code and go straight to the correct page to register to vote. And he put this up in his hospital in the spring of 2020. And then what happened? COVID-19, and no one wants to touch your iPad anymore, okay? So he has to bring his design point of view. He thought he'd solved it, right? He made a beautiful design, and now he has to change it. And what he did is so much better. Instead of an iPad kiosk, he created a system of lanyards that go with the hospital ID of hospital workers that has a barcode for scanning, and that these workers have this beautiful graphic that says, ask me about how to register to vote, and suddenly there's a human interaction with the people who want to register. And so instead of going up to a kiosk, which people might be intimidated about, you have your doctor or your nurse offering to help you register to vote. And it became a national campaign. Suddenly it cost less. It was easy to replicate in states across the US. And this very simple piece of human-centered design got better in response to crisis, which is really so great. So let me tell you a little bit about design and healing, creative responses to epidemics. We showed lots of masks in our exhibition, interesting examples of artists and designers and fashion designers, and even a famous tennis player using masks to communicate and to protect their friends and family during the epidemic. So during the summer of 2020, Naomi Osaka competed in the US Open, and it was a period of great racial injustice in this country and around the world, and great urgency around spreading awareness of violence against Black people. And she, every day during the US Open, she wore a different mask with the name of someone who had been murdered by police. And she donated those masks to the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. They're now part of the permanent history of our country, these amazing masks designed by a tennis player, and they are on view in our exhibition. This is a mask designed by Sky Kubakub, who is a fashion designer in Chicago, who specializes in designing fashion for queer people with disabilities. And Sky is going to do a lecture in our graduate theory and practice seminar in a couple weeks about their amazing work in the design for disability space. And this is Sky, and Sky created a mask with a clear panel which allows people who have audio impairments or speech impairments, or who are learning to speak English as a second language, anybody who needs to visualize the mouth during speech is benefited by this design. And it looks beautiful because everything sky makes is full of color and happiness and joy. And I'm going to kind of end my talk by talking about data graphics as a particular kind of graphic design that has had a huge role to play during the COVID-19 epidemic, and actually has a really important place in the history of modern medicine and epidemiology in particular. So dots and lines and colors and squares are not just formal elements of composition, but are actually used to convey life-saving data. And we're going to look at a few examples of that. So I just love how the most basic elements of Bauhaus-y graphic design have such hard work and such important work to do in our society. So the idea of a map with dots to show the density of some kind of phenomenon is really important to the invention of epidemiology. And this is a doctor who is a great graphic designer from 19th century London. And during that time, there were epidemics of a disease called cholera. And it was not known how cholera was spread. And here's some early example of graphic design in healthcare, which doesn't tell us much about the disease, right? It's a picture of a beautiful young woman who gets sick. And essentially all the artist could do was show the effects of the disease and also put a kind of little moral spin on it, right? Like that she's a virtuous person that gets ill and is now like a fallen person. And Dr. John Snow, he wanted to go farther. He wanted to find the science behind disease and what actually causes disease. And at the time, there was a debate about whether cholera was spread through the air or through simply the bad habits of poor people, or through some other means. And Dr. Snow thought maybe some other means. And he used maps to show that cholera was spread by water. And so this map shows two different areas of London that were serviced by two different water companies. And if you got water from the blue company, you got sick with cholera. And if you got your water from the pink company, you were fine. And it didn't matter if you were rich or you were poor or you were virtuous or fallen or if you were pretty or not. It mattered what water you were drinking. And that discovery changed the way cities create sewers. We just experienced it here in Baltimore, right? The science of monitoring water as a source of disease. The other thing that Dr. Snow did is he charted on a map of London which houses had people in them who were sick from cholera. And he found that the illness was clustered around a particular water pump in London, and that by shutting down that water pump, he controlled the spread of the disease. So this is profound, huge impact on how we still live today, how we understand disease today, and the best part, it's graphic design. Always comes down to that. This is the JHU COVID-19 dashboard, which became the global source of information about COVID during the pandemic, created here in Baltimore, Maryland, about 2 blocks away from where we are sitting today, the global source of information. And you might think that some big corporation created it, or some big government agency. Actually, it was created by an engineering professor, Lauren Gardner, and her graduate student at Hopkins. In February of 2020, as this pandemic was just picking up, she and her graduate students said, why is nobody counting the disease? Why is nobody tracking it? Governments weren't tracking it. Corporations weren't tracking it. Dr. Gardner and her graduate student tracked it, and they created this astonishing piece of information design. Yeah, the color's not great, but sorry about that. It's all red. Maybe I'll just go on from that. Okay. Let's see. Maybe this one will make a little more sense. Oh, bummer. It's usually because of the cable. Well, I'm going to play it anyway. So in this map, you can zoom in on any location in the world to see the density of COVID-19 cases in that community. And this is zooming in on the Midwest of America, which at that time had more cases than anywhere else in the world. And as you come in closer, you see individual cases. So imagine John Snow having a tool like that in the 19th century. Basically the same idea. Okay, how's our color? Not good, but we carry on, right? Okay, let's look at lines. Lines are such an important part of graphics, right? And showing change over time. This is from the Atlantic, and it's a line made out of dots. Okay, so just like you learned in like basic geometry, a line is a connection between two dots or an infinite number of dots. The beauty here is that the dots are also conveying information, right? So the dots get bigger and smaller, darker and lighter, to convey even more data within the temporal movement of the line from left to right. This is a graph by Scott Reinhardt at the New York Times, and he was interested during the spring of 2020, where will all those rich people in New York City, where were they going, right? We kept hearing that people were leaving New York to get away from COVID-19. It looks like Miami was one of the lucky recipients of all these New Yorkers. And so his line graph, the thicker the line is, the more people were going to that location. And the way they did the research is they looked at change of address announcements from the post office so that they could find who was changing their address to South Beach. Lots of people, okay. So lines show change over time, and lines are connections of dots, right? We put those dots together to create a line. And there's lots of ways to draw that, right? To create, to show that trend, right? To find the average, to look at where all those individual data points are going. And that's a big part of graphic designing for information. Okay, and I'm going to show you this beautiful map from the New York Times where it's showing waves of COVID-19 again in 2020. And each dot on the map is actually also a kind of line graph. So the beauty of information graphics is being able to really convey multiple numbers through simple visual means, right? So we get location, we get time, right? Because the timeline is moving, and we get the intensity in each of those locations represented through this very simple graphic form of the dot that becomes a line graph, right? It becomes a fever graph. So beautiful and so elegant. Okay, I'm going to try to do a little bit about color, but this might not work. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Is that color? Yeah, you can see that. Okay. Human beings designed this famous image of the virus. It was designed by 2 medical illustrators at the CDC. This digital image is in the permanent collection of Cooper Hewitt Museum. We felt that this was like a profound piece of design of our time. And it's not what the virus really looks like. It's a visualization. It's a dramatization of what the virus looks like based on scientific images, but also imagination. And one of the things we might ask about it is, why is the virus red, right? Viruses aren't actually red. But by making it red, the CDC artists wanted to convey the urgency of being aware of this threat that was spreading around the world. And as a graphic designer, I just love seeing how something like that very complex medical illustration became instantly an icon that was interpreted by endless other graphic designers to create something that people would immediately recognize. So there's just thousands of these, right? You too can download icons of COVID-19. And some of them are very straightforward. Some are a little bit scary, right? Droopy and sticky and, infected looking. Very scary. Whoa, don't want to go there. Kind of likable. Like, I want this one. He's cute. This one looks a little bit like a very famous clock, which is in the collection of Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. And why is it red? It's red to convey danger, right? And we have coded agreements about what color means. Red is stop, right? Green is good. And if we look at those JHU maps, we can see that color is used to express emotion. And in fact, some right-wing commentators were very angry at JHU for making the map red because they were worried that would get people worried. Right? And Dr. Gardner was like, yes, exactly. So on the dashboard, red signals the number of cases. Yellow signals the incidence of cases in a population. Green, yay, vaccinations. I know you all have one because you're here today. And white represented death. And white is a symbol of death in many cultures. And there's something very beautiful and poetic about using white that way here. Points of light. So I just want a moment to think about that. It's not just numbers, right? It's people. But most COVID graphics do use red to convey urgency and greater intensities of disease, and that is very intuitive for people to understand. I'm going to end with an example of a mapping project that avoids the color red in order to avoid that emotional push. So Elizabeth asked early, why does this matter to me, right? Well, all of you have a decision to make pretty much every day. Should I use the color red or a different color? Right? This is something that any artist or designer confronts regularly. What color should I use? So these maps are created by an organization called Policy Map. which creates maps about demographics in the US, and they're used by journalists, they're used by city councils, they're used by policymakers and government organizations. And this particular set of maps was created during the spring of 2020. And it has layers of information, right? So one layer is about minority communities living in Chicago. And here, neighborhoods that have a high degree of African American citizens are shown in green. And what the policy map did was overlaid that with other conditions in these same neighborhoods that were causing outsized negative impact from the pandemic. So these highly segregated neighborhoods have a lower life expectancy, and that is shown here in white. Dark purple shows high rates of hypertension, a disease which is associated with higher mortality from COVID-19. And I'm going to end by showing you a very short interview that we did with Maggie McCullough, who's the founder of Policy Map. And for her, it was very important not to use red, and in order to not stigmatize any layer of information, to show all information as fact to be studied by journalists and policymakers, and not to give an emotional weight to the information. And when I was working on this project, I got to interview doctors and scientists and engineers from all over the world who were doing work like Maggie McCullough is doing. And I'm going to end with a 1-minute clip of an interview with Maggie. I think we need sound. Can we get sound from my laptop? The short story is zip codes are correlated with life expectancy in the US because zip codes are correlated with poverty and wealth. And so maps help to reveal that. And important work done by data scientists and data graphic designers and cartographers helps us to understand that so that this injustice can be addressed. So that's it. I know it's some heavy graphic design stuff. We do fun things too, like pick fonts. So come do that with us as well. Thanks very much. Yeah, we can hear you. It's intimate here. I can't see you.
Have you heard of dementia villages?
Of what?
Dementia villages. They're like a...
Yes, you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, it's like, they're like designed specifically to keep the people with severe dementia they're beautifully designed to be like a tiny little village. Like, so it's combining like, elements of design, elements of healthcare, elements of, ethics and humanity and how to keep people healthy and happy while they're suffering from a debilitating brain problem.
It's a beautiful example.
It was super cool.
Have you seen one?
No, I've not seen one. They're in like Denmark and stuff.
Yeah, in civilized countries. Yeah, dementia villages is a really beautiful design concept that by creating a kind of safe town for people with dementia, it gives them the freedom to like go grocery shopping and go to the post office, but it's all like monitored and all safe. And also that all the design details are from the time when they were younger, which is often the time that people with dementia have the best memory of. So the time that you're living in now is what you will remember the most later. So, yeah, beautiful example.
do you have any examples of picking a font where the font makes the experience in a medical situation better? Was that in any of the research?
Well, that's a really good question about fonts. There are human-centered fonts. There are fonts designed for maximum legibility for people who are visually impaired. If you want one, it's free. It's called Atkinson's Hyperlegible, and you can download it from the Braille Institute. It's a gift for humanity, and it was designed to be the world's most legible font. So it is human-centered. It is not super beautiful, but it works because it avoids characters that look like each other. All the characters in this font are unique, and it makes it more human-centered.
That's great. There's one called Open Dyslexic, too, that's also open source and a gift to humanity. Yes. Something that I think was really apparent in the projects you presented, and human-centered design generally, is this idea of the designer doesn't actually know the answer, and you need other people to do that. Do you think that is that a human-centered design trait, and should it be just a design trait, period?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. We might say that all design should be human-centered, and I kind of pointed that out at the beginning by showing you a doorknob that's a work of art. In my opinion, there's room for doorknobs that are works of art, as long as we also have doorknobs that everybody can use, right? Ideally, the doorknob would be both, right? A work of art that is accessible. So I think there's room for all of it.
Are they incompatible? Right, like Open Dyslexic and your other reference, they are, at least to like modernist formalist standards, are not good looking fonts. But they're good fonts for people. And so why is there a conflict, do you think, there? Is that too big of a question?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Anybody like Helvetica? You love Helvetica. Do you think Helvetica is an accessible typeface? Well, so one of the things that makes a typeface more legible is that all the characters are unique. So in Helvetica, just picture it, because I know you've been there. Everybody have a picture of Helvetica in your mind? Now I want you to picture the letter U and the letter N. Are they the same thing upside down? I think in Helvetica, are they the same? So in many typefaces, there's a desire to make as many letters like match each other as possible. So a D is a B flipped, right? Which looks nice, right? Or a P in the Q. Are you with me? Yeah? Okay. We're done with that? No, go ahead, it's already later. Oh, traditional art like print? I love print. I mean, in my work as a writer and book person, I mostly work on computers, but the outcome of my work is often physical, like a museum exhibition where people actually go and sit on this beautiful bench and play with the hair, you know, that is traditional art. But to talk to the two designers in New Delhi, I needed Zoom, right? I needed computers to get this thing across the ocean and into our museum. So I like how the two things come together. That's a beautiful question. There's room for traditional art and design. Yeah, hi.
I was actually interested in coming back to the idea of legible in my foreign class this morning, we were talking about British typography with David Carson, and part of that was him saying sometimes it's legible but it doesn't communicate. So how do you shore up the difference between legibility and actual communication?
Okay, so the question is about legible typography or communication is one thing, but sometimes typography is not legible. I guess I would say the same thing about painting, right? Sometimes I can look at a painting and know exactly what it is. That's a portrait of Michelle Obama. I have no trouble reading what the message of the painting is. But some paintings take me longer to understand. And I think the same is true with design. The difference being is that most design in the world is meant to do a job and get out of the way, right? We don't want to be thinking about the chair. We want to be sitting in the chair. But there are times when we want a chair to be really beautiful like this, right? Where I walk into this room and the furniture is telling me something about love and healing and nature and sunlight. And it may not be the most functional thing in the world, but it has a deeper message than just function. And so I think that's kind of a beautiful way to end on maybe the best design does both.
I have one question.
Oh, another question.
Real
Hi.
quick, are there any human-centered design things in Baltimore that these new freshmen should check out? Like, that you're, you know what I mean? Like parks or spaces or...
Yeah, I think the Baltimore Museum of Art is a really beautifully designed human environment. And if you go there thinking about all the decisions that were made to make it accessible and a place of joy for all people, I think that's a great example of human-centered design, including a tactile map of the museum that you can touch what all the parts of the museum are. Okay, one more question. Wingdings. Well, Wingdings is a font that is just symbols and ornaments. And we certainly need more of those. Arrows and stars and check boxes and what is the deal, Christian Bjornard?
It is an ode to typographic history. It was not uncommon to have an array of weird ornaments as a printer to fill out for various reasons. And at the initial dawn of computer typography, typefaces didn't have very many spaces for characters. And so typefaces like Wingdings existed to be typefaces of just extra characters that might serve the purposes you needed typographically.
I need a heart and a square and a triangle and a little flower, and I need a checkbox and emojis.
Yeah. Ellen, thank you so much. We appreciate having you. Thank you. We're bumping into each other. Okay, don't forget to scan your attendance, or if the scanner isn't working for some reason, you can manually enter your attendance at that link, or you can come on